Hello, my bookish friends. Welcome to my August wrap-up. I'm not going to be doing these in any particular order, but I am going to start with the ones that I don't have a physical copy of, and I'll be starting with the 2 DNFs that I had this month. The first one was luckily a library book, since I only read the first chapter, and this was called At the End of Every Day. I can't give you a synopsis for this one because I went into it blind and I really don't know what it's about, other than it sounds like there was this girl that works at an amusement park and strange things begin to happen at the end of every day. And that's all I really know about it, but I just couldn't get into it. The first chapter was 31 pages long, so even though this was a short book, it already felt really long. And I just couldn't get in this girl's head. She was just weird and quirky, but not in a fun way. The author had oversaturated the book with so many details that I don't really care about. And I just couldn't get into the prose or the writing style. And I just didn't want to force myself to get through it, even though it was short. It's like 260 pages or something. So I just don't think it's for me. The next DNF that I had is a science fiction book. It's actually not out yet. I had an arc of it. It comes out September 12th. Well, I guess it's probably out now, but this video is probably not going to come out until after it's released. So I guess it is probably out. So this is a new release science fiction novel by M.X. Liu. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And I couldn't get into the writing style. I couldn't get into the prose. I couldn't get behind the main characters. They just didn't do anything for me. But the biggest issue I had with this book is I'm assuming this is a man. I couldn't find anything on the internet about the author, so I don't know if this is a man or a woman. But I'm assuming it's a man because he cannot write women characters. Sorry to say. We're going along with this man named Hayden, and in the very first chapter, he goes to this laboratory where he works, and his dad is found murdered in his laboratory. And so apparently he had been working on some kind of mysterious serum called, what is it, the Sisyphus formula or something? And it's supposed to give you eternal life. So this man finds his father murdered, and he decides that he's going to discover who did this and exact his revenge. And he's going to make sure that the information that his dad had on this formula doesn't get out. And so the building goes into lockdown, and there's like 6 different people that are on lockdown. And one of them ends up being his ex-girlfriend. And I don't know if she's supposed to be the main character, because the first couple of chapters, you're in Hayden's head, but it's in third person. But then all of a sudden, when it's in her head, it's from first person. So is she supposed to be the main character? And if so, why is it largely told from his perspective? But then I think what it is you find out later it was supposed to be like a journal entry, but it didn't read like a journal entry. So it was a little bit confusing. And this woman, she's in lockdown and there's been a murder, and she's like, oh no, the killer must be one of us. But then she spends the whole rest of the time just thinking about her ex-boyfriend and should we get back together and blah, blah, blah. And I just wanted to roll my eyes. And she has a master's degree in biochemistry, but she wasn't very smart. Sorry to say. So I would assume that somebody with a biochemistry degree would know basic things about biology. And so when he says he wants to put his father's body in the freezer, and she's like, oh, why would he want to do that? That's strange. And I'm like, really? Because he's going to start decomposing and you're locked in there with him? Do you really want a ripe corpse just rotting with you? Of course you would want to put him in the freezer. That's like a common sense thing. And then she literally asks Hayden later on, how long does it take for a body to decompose? And I'm like, you have a master's degree in biochemistry and you don't know that? I just am not buying it. So I was just not into this main character, or seemingly main character. I don't even know if she's the main character, but either way, I could not get in behind her. I couldn't get into the story. I wanted it to have all these good creepy vibes like Frankenstein, and it didn't. And I don't know, it's just not for me. So I was moving on. The next 2 I want to talk about are library books. The first one is called Children of Chicago. And this one sounds really, really cool because it's supposed to be like a dark fantasy, but also like a murder mystery detective story. It's about the Pied Piper, and so you have these children that are going missing, and there's the person behind it. They're calling the Pied Piper, and they're trying to decide how he's doing it. And it sounds really interesting, but again, I didn't like the main character. She was kind of driving me crazy. I thought the story was a little bit confusing in the beginning, and I don't know, I just couldn't get into it. I don't know what the reason is. It sounds really good, and I'll admit that I skimmed a lot of this book. It had a lot of history about Chicago, and some of it was interesting, and some of it I just didn't care. And I ended up just skimming a lot of the middle and then reading like the last 100 pages. So it wasn't terrible. I would maybe give it a 3 star, but I think that's being a little bit generous. But I can see why people would like this book, though. I just don't think it's for me, but I think given the right audience, this would probably work for you. It is part of a series, so just be aware of that going in if you want to check it out. The next library book is Cutting Teeth. This is a thriller about little baby vampires. I don't know that they're technically vampires, but they do crave blood. And these mothers, that will do anything for their children, they start feeding their children blood anytime they get cranky or tantrum or they want to have blood. So I thought that was a little bit interesting and fun. And the main storyline, though, is all these little children go to the same preschool, and their preschool teacher ends up murdered. And so they're trying to decide if these children killed her in order to get the blood or if somebody else did it. And so that's kind of the overarching mystery of the story, is you're trying to find out what happened to this teacher. And while I really liked this book, I wouldn't say it's a new favorite, but I thought it was fun and interesting and unique. So I would probably give it maybe 3.5 or 4 stars. And the next one I'm going to talk about was an ebook, and this was an ARC I had from NetGalley, and it's called The Hike. And this one I was very pleasantly surprised by. I thought it would be just a fun little summary read, but I wasn't really expecting anything earth-shattering or amazing. And to be fair, it isn't necessarily earth-shattering, but I really enjoyed this one. And the main reason behind that is because of the characters. I really liked these characters. I thought they were refreshing, because normally when you have a group of women, they're very catty and very mean to each other, and they have all this drama. But this one, while it did have drama, it was like a natural drama that actually would happen. It didn't feel like it was just torn in just to be dramatic. And I guess I should tell you what this is about first, but there's a group of 4 women, and they go on this hike up in Norway, and it's this really hard climb. But every year they go on a vacation together, and the one whose turn it is to decide the vacation, she really wanted to do something out in nature and something that was hard, because she was going through a possible divorce and she was feeling low, and she started walking and she discovered nature, and it made her feel stronger and better about herself. She wanted to share that with her friends. So while they were all reluctant and they wanted to go to some beach somewhere or something, they went on this hike with their friend, and they get entangled in something that they're not meant to. I really liked this group of women. I felt like their friendship was very authentic, and I liked that they actually were friends, because a lot of times you read these thrillers about these girlfriends and it's like, why are these women even friends? They don't even seem to like each other. So it was refreshing to have a group of friends that actually were friends and still have the drama, still have the fun of them, getting into fights or whatever, but it felt very authentic and it felt refreshing compared to other thrillers with female friendships. I would highly recommend this one. It just came out. I should have looked up when it came out, but I think it was recent. I think it was within the last few weeks. So I would definitely check this one out. I know summer is pretty much over. It's fall time now, but if you're still in the mood for a summer read, I think this is a good one. Okay, that's all the non-physical ones I have to talk about. So now we're going to talk about some physical books. Starting with manga, we're going to start with Spy Family. This is the 2nd volume in the Spy Family series, and I enjoyed this one even more than the first one. I thought the first one was really cute, but it's got that setup feel to it. You're not that far into the story, and you're just learning who these characters are. And so now that the characters are established, it's nice just to continue into the story. And I was a little bit afraid that there'd be too much like spy action and all that stuff, which isn't really what I'm into, but it's not. I mean, you do have the mission and you do have a little bit of action, but it focuses more on the characters. And on this one, you focus more on the 6-year-old girl, and she's at school and she's trying to deal with this bully that she's supposed to be befriending for the mission. And it was just a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to continue this story. Next, we have Dissolving Classroom by Junji Ito. I love Junji Ito, and so when I saw this at Barnes & Noble the other day, I knew I had to get it. So this is a story, as you can tell, about these children that go to this classroom, and there's this man, and if he apologizes to you, then you start to dissolve. So that's the basic premise of this book, but I thought it was a lot of fun. It's a quick read. It's Junji Ito, and I pretty much love most things that he comes out with. I won't say everything, but for the most part, I'm never let down by Junji Ito. It's hard to rate manga because they're not quite the same as regular novels, but I would give both of these 5 stars. It's especially hard because I want to rate it on the whole series, but Spy Family, I'm only 2 volumes in, and Junji Ito doesn't do series. So I would give these both 5 stars. They were fun, they were quick, they had great art. Next, we have The House of Salt and Sorrows. This is a dark fantasy YA novel, and this was a reread for me. I've already read this a couple of years ago, but the second book was coming out, so I wanted a refresher. And this is a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses, but it's got like a dark twist to it. And she made it more gothic, which I really enjoyed. And I love it because the setting was a lot of fun. It had a lot of ocean stuff. Their emblem is an octopus, and it talked a lot about that and about seafood. And when I love these kind of tales because you get to hear about these pretty dresses and this cool manor that they live in, or castle, I should say. And it was just a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this one quite a bit. I would give this a 5 stars. Next, we have The House of Root and Ruin, and this is the second book. And this one's even more gothic than the first one, although ironically, I wouldn't say it's quite as creepy as the first one. It does have a few scenes that were pretty creepy. For those who might have read it, I especially loved the peacock part. This is your classic gothic tale. You've got the big manor, you've got the girl in the night dress wandering around at night, you've got secret passageways, you've got secrets, and all of that good gothic vibes was wonderful. However, I don't think I liked this one quite as much as the first book. It's a lot longer. It's like over 500 pages. And the first half I really enjoyed. I read online some reviewers thought the first half was kind of boring, and then it picks up, and I was kind of the opposite. I really enjoyed the first half. I didn't find it boring or slow at all. But once it was revealed what part of the secret was, I found my enjoyment of it a little bit lessened. I don't really know why. It just wasn't quite the way I wanted the story to go. And I will warn you that there's a little bit of sexiness in this book. And I don't know, I don't think sex scenes are necessarily appropriate for YA. I think it should stay YA, but that's just my own opinion. And I don't necessarily like to read that in my books. And so that was kind of a bummer. The next thing I want to say might be a slight spoiler, not as far as like the mystery goes, but just part of the romance. So if you don't want to hear it, go ahead and fast forward. If you don't mind, or if you've already read the book, then go ahead and listen. But one of the issues I had with this book is with the main romance. She felt kind of lukewarm about it, which was disappointing. And then she meets the, I don't necessarily want to say, in case people are watching that haven't read the book, but when she meets another person, and then all of a sudden she's like all into him and wants to get with him, even though he was just the biggest jerk to her, I did not like that. I did not like that she wanted to make out with the guy that was a jerk, and the guy that was so nice and so gentlemanly, she's just like, meh. You know, that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and I didn't particularly like that. So this was a good one, and I really enjoyed it, but I wouldn't say it lives up to the first book. I would give this a 4 stars. Next, we have You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight, and this is another YA novel, but it's a horror novel. And if you like slashers, you will love this book. I wouldn't necessarily call it a slasher itself, and in some ways I was disappointed by that, which is funny because I don't really like slashers, to be honest. But it's got so many like fandom type things about it and a lot of Easter eggs, and I think people that love old 80s slasher movies are going to love this book. It was so fun. It was definitely a horror lover's dream because it had a lot of references, it had a lot of stuff that you see in old 80s movies, and that was a lot of fun. And that was my favorite aspect of this story. The beginning setup was so much fun. So it's about this girl who works at a full contact horror attraction, and they're able to pretend that they're part of a slasher and get the patrons that are paying to be there to think that a real slasher is actually happening. And even though they signed up for it, they thought it was going to be fake, but their acting and their special effects and all that is so convincing that they are able to convince them that it's real. And so it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this one a lot. I would give it probably 4.5 stars. The ending got a little bit Scooby-Doo-ish, but then the very, very ending, like the epilogue, I really enjoyed. And I just thought for a YA novel and people that love horror, this was a great book, and I really enjoyed it. I read it from the library, and I liked it enough that I had to go buy my own copy. So if that tells you anything, this is really short. So it's a really fast, quick, easy read, and it was a lot of fun. Next, we have All These Worlds. This is a science fiction novel. This is the third in a series, so I really can't say that much about it. But the series is about a man named Bob, and he decides to have his brain scanned so that when he inevitably dies, he'll be able to live on as a robot. Well, unfortunately, he ends up being more of a computer instead of a robot. So he has no body, and that was really disconcerting for him. And they put him into a spaceship and kind of just send him out into the world to explore and to help find a habitable planet because, of course, what happens a lot in these types of books, the humanity's on the brink of extinction and Earth is no longer able to sustain life. So his job is to go find habitable planets. I thought this was really fun. I actually listened to the audiobook, and it was narrated by the same guy that does Project Hail Mary, and I think he is a fantastic narrator. I love him. And this was kind of similar to Project Hail Mary, not in plot, but in like character, because it was kind of serious, but also really fun, and it kind of had the same type of humor as Ryland. So if you enjoyed Project Hail Mary, I think you'll enjoy this one. I will say there's supposed to be 4 books in this series, but this one kind of read like the conclusion to me. And so that was a little bit confusing because they pretty well tied up all loose ends. The way they ended it, like he really didn't need to continue on. There didn't need to be a 4th book. So I don't know if I'm going to continue on or not. My husband continued on and he likes the 4th one and he thinks it's worth continuing. So I might at some point continue the story. But it wrapped up well enough that I'm not running out right now to do it. Last but not least, we have The Trap by Catherine Ryan Howard. And this was a definite 5 stars for me. I loved this book. I devoured this book. It's very, very short, so I read it in like 2 or 3 days. And if you like books about serial killers, I think you'll really enjoy this book. So this is told in 3 different point of views. You have the point of view of a woman whose sister went missing a year ago. And then you also have the perspective of a woman who wants to be a cop, but right now she works in like the missing persons call center. So people call her and then she patches it through to the real police. But she gets invited by a real cop to go hang out with her and do cop things with her. So that was kind of fun. And then you also get the perspective of the serial killer. And that's always interesting and fun. This book is also set in Ireland, which I thought was really fun. It didn't necessarily have a ton of Irish stuff in it, like it probably could have been set anywhere. But just the fact that it was set in Ireland and that there was a few things like the terminology that they used that was Irish, I thought it was really unique and fun. And I really want to read The Nothing Man by this author now because she does reference it once in the book and then once in her author's note. and it makes me really excited to read that one. So I'm going to be bumping that up on my TBR. So this is a new release and I highly recommend it. Okay, that's all I have for you guys. That's my entire August wrap up. Those are all the books I read this month, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked this video, please hit the thumbs up and consider subscribing. If you hit that notification bell, you'll never miss a video from me. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.